Welcome back to another action-packed episode of Parent Quick Smarts for 5th grade. In this episode, we will be covering 5th grade multiplication of fractions. In the past, multiplication of fractions may have been taught to us simply as multiply across the top, then multiply across the bottom, find the GCF, and simplify. This simple procedure served us well in terms of merely finding a product. However, it did not really build an understanding of how or why the procedure works, or what we were doing with the values when we multiply. Our 5th grade students will be asked to explore using what they have already learned about adding fractions and multiplication of whole numbers to come to a deeper understanding of not only how to use this procedure for multiplication of fractions, but why it works. In this unit, your 5th grade child will build a conceptual understanding of the multiplication of fractions by a whole number, using strategies such as repeated addition, area models, and number lines. Only after they have built a conceptual understanding of how to multiply fractions will they be introduced to the algorithm. By the end of this unit, your student will be able to multiply fractions by fractions and fractions by mixed numbers. When starting this unit, your child will most likely start by clarifying the meaning of multiplication. For example, the expression 3 times 4 represents 3 groups of 4, which is 12. Extending this thinking to fractions, the expression 2/3 times 3 would be understood as 2/3 of a group of 3, which would be 2. If a student has this understanding of multiplication, they could then reason what is happening in a multiplication expression such as 3/4 times 8. They could see that their product will be less than 8 because we are finding a fraction or portion of a group of 8. By knowing the relative size of the product based on an understanding of the factors, the students will have a basis for determining the reasonability of their answer. To follow through and solve this problem, the students could use manipulatives, such as unit cubes, to show a group of 8. Then split that group into fourths. And from this model, they should be able to see that 3/4 of a group of 8 would be 6. Let's look at an example of a real-world problem that your 5th grade student may be challenged to solve. First, we would want the student to look at the problem and determine that it is asking them to find the amount of food that Spot gets. The time frame is a week in the problem, which the student should understand is 7 days. If Spot will be given 3/4 of a cup of food each day, then the student would have to find 7 groups of 3/4 of a cup, or 7 times 3/4 of a cup. Your child may estimate by understanding that 3/4 is almost a whole, and 7 groups of a whole would be about 7 cups of food for good old Spot. Next, your child would need to create a model to represent and explain their solution. For example, by using a number line, they could use what they already know about the multiplication of fractions as repeated addition of equal groups to show that 7 groups or jumps of 3/4 would end at 21/4, or 5 wholes and an extra fourth. After the student understands conceptually how to find the whole number of groups of a fractional amount, we would want them to try to relate their model to the more efficient algorithm. 7 groups of 3/4 would be 21/4 using multiplication, which can be rewritten as 5 1/4. By the end of this unit, students should be able to multiply mixed numbers, such as Alicia wants to cover the rectangular floor of her closet with tile. The floor is 2.5 feet by 2 1/4 feet. What is the total area? Students should be able to use their understanding of multiplication to see that 2 1/2 groups of 2 1/4 would be between 4 and 6. Students could then be asked to directly model what is happening in this situation. Using an area model to show Alicia's closet floor, the student should be able to see that they are finding 2.5 groups of 2 1/4. To create our model, we would first have to show 2 1/4 by splitting each whole column into fourths, and then highlighting the 2 whole and 1/4 of a column. Now we would need to find 2 1/2 groups or rows of that 2 1/4 that we shaded. By splitting each of the whole rows or groups into halves and then highlighting the 2 whole and 1/2 of a group or row, the overlapping area, now in light purple, shows 2 1/2 groups of 2 1/4. If we look at the model, we have now created a common unit of eighths, as each whole square has been split into 8 equal parts. We could find the product of 2 1/2 times 2 1/4 by adding up all of the eighths in each section. 4 whole squares plus 8 eighths plus 1/8 plus 4 more eighths would give us a total of 13 eighths, or 5 5/8.
Students should be able to use the area model to gain a deeper understanding of what we're doing when we multiply fractions by fractions in the standard algorithm. For example, if I were to rename each of these mixed numbers as fractions greater than 1, for example, 2 1/2 would be 5 halves times 2 1/4, which would be 9/4. I could relate this back to our model by taking our fourths and taking 1/2 group of each fourth. Which gives us a common unit of eighths in each square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In our area model, if we take 9 eighths by 5 eighths, it will give us a total area of 45 eighths, or 5 5/8.
Some ways that you could practice multiplying fractions with your child in the real world are: cook with your child. When you need to scale the amount of a recipe down for half the number of servings, have your 5th grader find what half of each ingredient would be. Does your child receive an allowance? Ask them to figure out how much money they would make if you paid them by the hour and they only worked 3 2/5 of an hour. Have you ever made Lego creations with your 5th grader? Try to make a scale model of your house or a room. Measure the dimensions and have your child figure out what they would be scaled down to, say, 1/20 of the original size, and then create and share. Here are some sample problems that your students may be asked to solve as they progress through this unit. Some questions that you may want to ask your child to help build their understanding as they progress through the unit are: what happens to the product when one of the factors is increased or decreased? How do you model multiplying whole numbers by a fraction? What strategies can you use to multiply a fraction by a fraction greater than 1? Thank you for joining us today on Parent Quick Smarts. Remember, the best way to support your child's education is to keep in communication with your child's teacher. Until next time, look at these websites: thinkcentral.com and elementarymath.mysdhc.org. See you next episode.